Okay, this is Mr. Robert Anderson from Greenback, Tennessee, and we're happy to have you today. He is a Korean War veteran, and so we'll go ahead and start asking a few questions here. First, I want to thank you for allowing us to do this, but about your service, were you drafted or did you enlist?
No, I was ahead of the draft. I got right under the draft. They were sending out draft notices, and a lot of the boys in high school got their draft notices in the mailbox, and they went to the Navy like recruiting office. They didn't want to be foot soldiers,
Right.
so they went to the Navy, and the Air Force. I had an uncle that influenced me to go to the Navy. He said one thing about the Navy, he said, you'd always have a warm bed to sleep in and a chow hall and had good food on the ship. So I joined the Navy in 1951, April 16, 1951, and was sent to boot camp at Great Lakes, Illinois. It's right out of Chicago. Stayed there 3 months. After basic training, I went to Norfolk, Virginia, and went to the air base and was attached to a squadron of planes there out of Floyd Bennett Field, New York.
How old were you at the time when you enlisted?
I was a ripe old man at 18.
18.
Prime.
Were you living in Greenback at that
Yes.
time?
I was in the Air Division, and so I was attached to a squadron, and they were attached to the base their home base was Norfolk, Virginia, and I stayed there 3 months, and then we went aboard the ship and went to the Mediterranean for 6 months. And our primary purpose in being at the Mediterranean was we were to defend the Mediterranean Sea at this particular time in history. The Korean War was warming up pretty good. We don't know why we were there. Nobody could tell us really, because the basic reason we were there because it was Truman's war.
Yeah.
President Truman declared war, or he didn't declare war, did not declare. It was a police battle. Mm-hmm. We didn't see any policemen.
You were the policeman.
We were the policemen. But they told us that you stay in the Mediterranean for 6 months, and then there'll be another ship relieve you in 6 months. So that happened. So we came back to the States and stayed 6 months and went back to the Mediterranean twice more, two other times. And I was in for 4 years, and I made 3 med cruises in that 4 years, and 2 of them I went on a shakedown cruise. The ship, when I went aboard the ship, was in dry dock, being repaired, going over, and then we went on a shakedown cruise. We did war games in Guantanamo, Cuba, and there we stayed 3 months down in Cuba, and that was January. And we left here in December, got down there. It was summertime. We left here in December the 29th, and we got down there. We had 80-degree weather, and we enjoyed that. But it was played war games. And we sent the planes out, and they went to the island of Malta and dropped their bombs and trained over there. The pilots did. So Then after that, we came back to Norfolk, Virginia, and had a weekend liberty and went straight back to the Mediterranean. So, Mediterranean was, they were having summer weather when we got there, and we enjoyed that.
So you spent a lot of time in the Mediterranean then?
But it was basically while we were there. And I didn't know much about the Navy. All I knew about the Navy was that when I was a kid, we used to see the sailors come home with their uniforms on, the girls all went crazy over the sailors.
Being that young, did you recognize what the Cold War was?
We had no idea why we were there. War had not been declared. We were there to defend that part of the country. And I did not know, I had never had any idea why we went, our troops and our forces went to Korea, what they were fighting for. They wouldn't tell you. The communists was there, and we were to head off the communist armies. And Stalin tried his best. He wanted the prime minister, or the dictator Stalin in Russia wanted a base in the Mediterranean. So the only way they could get out into the Mediterranean was through the Black Sea from Russia. So if he had a base in the Mediterranean Sea, he would have another base that he could get closer to the United States with his weapons. And so we were to defend the Mediterranean at all costs. If war had broken out, we would have been there till something else changed.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, what was your primary job on the ship?
I was air resting gear, which worked back in the cables that caught the plane with their tail hooks on the planes. Mm-hmm. And that was the most important part of the Naval Air Force, was to catch that plane. That was our purpose, was to catch that plane. We caught it.
It went off in the water if you hadn't, right?
Well, some of them did.
Well, if you would, share some of your most interesting experiences during the service.
Well, on the flight deck, it was very exciting. You were up there and the planes were coming in and out, and you didn't go to sleep on the flight deck. If you did, you were in trouble. Mm-hmm. You'd get killed. It was very, very high, intense work. The plane that we had were fighter planes. And we had a group of fighter planes that had been to Korea, Red Rippers. They were hotshot pilots, and they had seen a lot of action in Korea. And they came back and they told us about the Korean hills and the valleys and the swamps, and they were over there supporting the troops that were in Korea. And they would go out, and they had napalm, which was an explosive bomb. They'd go out to the jungle and they'd set these napalms off and burn up some of the jungle where the troops were. And it was very intense. And so we had to. It's scary to think about what we were in, and we didn't know enough to be scared about the war at that time. We didn't know much about it. In fact, when I was on that ship, there was 4 my friends came aboard that ship, and I've got pictures of all 4 of us together in different divisions, and I was surprised when I saw them come aboard the ship. There was 4,000 people, I'm sorry, 4,000 people on that ship. And 4 of them were Greenback.
And they didn't know you were going to be there either?
No, they didn't know. They were surprised.
And talk a little bit about the ship you were on, the USS Coral Sea, which would be similar to what we're looking at now in this model. And I wanted to ask you about the tailhook job, keeping those planes on the ship. How difficult was that, and what did you really have to do?
Okay, let's look at the ship structure here. It had cables stretched across the deck from one side to the other, and this cable was attached to a system down below that had resistant fluids in it. It's like a shock absorber on a car. When the planes caught a cable, well, it would go down below decks and bring this big cylinder, 12-inch cylinder, in about 30 feet. They had that much resistance in 30 feet, and this fluid would go through a small orifice, and it would stop. I can't explain how it works that you would understand it, but it had a very small orifice that brought the fluids from one part of that cylinder up into a big reservoir, and when he would stop that plane would stop in 120 feet. There was that much resistance in that system. That was pretty much the way I would explain it. But on your car, it has a shock absorber that goes down, and it comes back by the resistance and the air pressure against the fluids. And that's what we had, air pressure fluid, that plane had to push that fluid up through that small orifice. And as he did that, the fluid in the cylinder and the air pressure came back to 0. That's the way that they designed it.
How many planes were on those ships?
We had 120 planes. That's a lot of planes on
Yeah,
a small plane. But basically, the primary purpose is to launch the planes and to catch them. And everything else is secondary to that.